World War II might bring to mind powerful tanks, massive air raids, and grueling battles on land. But the war, the real war, rioted on the waves. Small yet impactful, the Kriegsmarine was a thorn in the side of the Allied forces. But how did a tiny country fighting on so many fronts and with limited naval access almost put the world on its knees? Today we'll be uncovering Germany's naval campaigns and the ships that so nearly made Hitler's dream a reality. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry knows that Germany was the brunt of the Axis forces in World War II. But who's telling their coming-of-age story? It's no secret that at the dawn of the 20th century, the British ruled the sea. Projecting power at a global scale, the Royal Navy, with its technological advancements and elite sailors, controlled entire trade routes and expanded the empire's vast territories. And don't get us started on how the US went full throttle in its shipbuilding and air power to become one of the world's foremost naval powers. On the other hand, Germany had no right to become one. Historically, the nation focused more on its army. Would you blame them? Given its Central European location, the country had limited access to the world's oceans, and much of its naval operations were confined to the Baltic, or through limited passages like the North Sea Canal, which is really funny because both of these exit points were easily monitored by the Royal Navy. Secondly, during the interwar years, Germany was further handicapped by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost some of their territory, were deprived of valuable industrial and agricultural income, and were also banned from having sophisticated naval weapons like the U-boats in the future. But despite these limitations, Germany harbored ambitions of rebuilding its navy. Hitler rejected the treaty and created the Kriegsmarine in 1935. However, unlike Allied forces like Britain or the US, Germany had to start from scratch. They faced an uphill drive to push the boundaries of innovation, to compensate for its disadvantage, none of which were ever going to be easy. Lofty ambitions like that required time, years of experience and gradual technological advancement, which Germany couldn't afford. In many cases, German ship designs were rushed, leading to vulnerabilities that became fatally clear during the war. Don't get me wrong, the Kriegsmarine punched above its weight. Many of its designs were not only beautiful, but also incredibly efficient. The U-boats, for instance, were worth their weight in gold, and the Battle of the Atlantic was a major headache for the Allies. Yet, many of the ships utilized by the Germans were underwhelming. Remember the KMS Blucher? As the second of 5 Admiral Hipper-class heavy cruisers of Nazi Germany's Kriegsmarine, one would expect the ship to have a seasoned operational history. Alas, Blucher is only remembered for its tragic and swift demise during the Battle of Drobach Sound, a sharp reminder of the nation's flaws. Launched in 1937 and completed in 1939, the ship's construction followed the naval arms race that marked the interwar period. It was built to be fast, durable, and have enough firepower to rival other nations' naval vessels. The hull alone was made up of high-quality steel, and the ship boasted extensive armor plating, 160 millimeters of belt armor, and 30 to 50 millimeters of deck armor to resist heavy shelling. And when you combined its 203 meters of length and 32 knots of speed, you've got a really scary cruiser on paper. But as the war eventually showed, some of these design elements led to pretty significant vulnerabilities. Before we talk about it though, allow me to iterate that Blucher was not deficient in armor either. In fact, it was actually well armed, featuring 8-inch guns for 4 twin turrets, along with 12 105mm dual-purpose guns, 12 37mm anti-aircraft guns, 16 20mm anti-aircraft cannons, and torpedo tubes. Speaking of which, one of the major drawbacks of the Blucher's design was that while it could handle itself against surface ships, its protection against underwater attacks, particularly torpedoes, left much to be desired. Secondly, the compartmentalization and flooding control systems weren't as advanced as those in other contemporary warships. This increased the cruiser's vulnerability to below-the-waterline damage, as was the case in the Battle of Drobach Sound. Yes, the Blucher's defining moment came during the German invasion of Norway in April 1940. As the flagship of the naval force sent to capture Oslo, the Blucher led the charge through Oslofjord. The task at hand was simple: land troops, seize Norway's capital, and obliterate whoever stood in their way. Easier said than done, though. Entering a narrow passage leading to Oslo, the Germans were expecting to either catch the Norwegians off guard or easily beat its defenses. Who says pride doesn't come before fall? The Germans failed to consider one thing: Fort Oscarsborg, an old, seemingly outdated fortress. As the Blucher passed through the fjord, Norwegian guns opened fire at close range, hitting Blucher's port side twice. The first was high above the bridge, hitting the battle station for the commander of the anti-aircraft guns. The second 28-centimeter shell hit near the aircraft hangar, igniting a large fire. As the blaze spread, it triggered the explosion of infantry explosives, complicating firefighting efforts. The blast also set fire to 2 Ardo seaplanes, one on the catapults and the other in a hangar. Worse still, the fortress launched torpedoes from a submerged torpedo battery that the Germans hadn't detected. It hit the Blucher below the waterline, where it was most vulnerable. When the fire eventually reached one of Blucher's 10.5-centimeter ammunition magazines, it triggered a massive explosion that ruptured engine room bulkheads and ignited fuel stores. As the damage worsened, the ship began to capsize, leading to the order to abandon ship. Many were not so lucky. While the exact number is unclear, some naval historians estimate hundreds were lost. Why did the Blucher perform so badly? Well, it's a combination of 2 things: poor planning and design flaws. Yes, the Germans rushed its design. Yes, the cruiser was also vulnerable to torpedoes. But we can't forget the fact that the German naval force also underestimated their opponents. You see, the Blucher's demise screams the importance of both factors. The most successful ships not only had capable design, but were also manned with adequate plans. Blucher was a ship that looked powerful on paper, but failed when faced with a smaller, more prepared army. Germany faced a hard, harsh lesson, but they learned. First, they realized the fundamental importance of integrating both air and submarine support to complement the weaknesses in surface vessels. As simple as it is, it marked a seismic shift in their naval campaigns going forward. Secondly, the Germans made monumental technological upgrades on their surface ships. They improved anti-aircraft defenses and also bolstered underwater protection to counter both torpedoes and submarine attacks. Finally, they tweaked their compartmentalization systems to control flooding more effectively, thus reducing the chance of catastrophic loss from torpedo strikes. Any guess as to which ship included most, if not all, of these designs? Yep, you guessed it. Battleships. To be fair, Germany didn't have a lot of them. While the Kriegsmarine realized their earlier mistakes, they mostly used submarines like U-boats. They were more effective and had great success in the war. Battleships, on the other hand, were becoming obsolete to aircraft carriers and destroyers. But the best German battleship? Easily the Bismarck-class battleships. And only 2 were made. The Bismarck and her sister ship, Tirpitz. Though it had been laid down before the loss of Blucher, its completion in 1941 benefited from the lessons learned in previous engagements. It was better armored and had enhanced anti-aircraft defenses. Music to the ears of the Kriegsmarine. Weighing over 42,000 tons and loaded with 8 15-inch guns. Saying Tirpitz was a massive battleship is an understatement. The ship's armor was thicker than previous designs, and its anti-aircraft capabilities were significantly improved, making it more resistant to aerial bombardments. And yes, the design had better resistance to torpedo hits. Along with its main guns, the ship boasted a formidable array of secondary and anti-aircraft weapons, including 15-centimeter SK-C-28 guns and 105mm Flak 38 AA guns, both designed for offense and defense. She was also heavily armored, with up to 13 inches of belt armor and 14 inches of turret armor. Overall, the Tirpitz's biggest strengths were its sheer size, 30.8 knots of speed, and devastating firepower. Its thick armor and sturdy design allowed it to absorb damage while continuing to fight. However, I can't help but feel its size may have also become a flaw. Having a massive profile is so often a double-edged sword, as it makes it easier for airstrikes to target. Plus, it also leads to high maintenance requirements. Speaking of airstrikes, the AA defenses were later considered to be inadequate in comparison to the intense airstrikes it faced later in the war. Despite having limited combat engagements, the Tirpitz was still an important player. On the 13th of November 1941, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder moved the notion that Tirpitz should be deployed to, you guessed it, Norway. There she could play a 2-pronged role in targeting Soviet-bound convoys and serving as a deterrent, thereby tying down British forces and discouraging an Allied invasion. Despite his earlier ban on Atlantic operations following Bismarck's loss, Hitler approved the plan. Modifications were then made to the Tirpitz, like enhancing its anti-aircraft defenses and repositioning the 10.5-centimeter guns on the superstructure to improve their range of fire. In hindsight, it played its role well. It was significantly better than many German ships and overcame the problems of the Blucher. However, the biggest flaw in the Tirpitz operational history was still its vulnerability to air attacks. I mean, sure, it had a powerful armament and could conquer both surface vessels and submarines, yet repeated attacks, including the use of massive tallboy bombs, severely damaged the ship. A force of 32 Lancasters from NOS 9 and 617 squadrons dropped 29 tallboy bombs on the ship, scoring 2 direct hits and 1 near miss. One bomb pierced the deck between towers Anton and Bruno, but did not detonate. Another stuck midship between the aircraft catapult and the funnel, causing extensive damage. It created a large hole in the ship's side and bottom, destroying the entire section of belt armor in that area. Soon the Tirpitz capsized, resulting in the loss of over 1,000 crew members. It was another painful reminder: air power conquers ships. In any case, are you starting to see the pattern? Blucher was good, but it had a lot of flaws. This gave it a wacky operational system, which in introspection must have been utterly humiliating. The Tirpitz, on the other hand, was much better. She played her role really well and held her own against the Allies, who were just itching to finally sink her. Matter of fact, did you know she was crazy enough to make the Allies plan well-oiled operations against her? After a series of ineffective bombing raids and failed torpedo attacks in October 1942, they turned to the newly designed X-Craft midget submarines. The planned operation, known as Operation Source, aimed to target Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and Lützow. The X-Craft would be towed by larger submarines to their targets, allowing them to slip under anti-torpedo nets and place 2 powerful ton mines onto the seabed underneath the ships. It just goes to show how annoying the German battleships like the Tirpitz were. But speaking of rear pains, one of the best performing surface vessels for the Germans during World War II was the Scharnhorst. It's no surprise why she was one of the chief targets in Operation Source. Commissioned in 1939, the Scharnhorst was part of a class of battleships designed with the concept of battlecruiser in mind. It was to combine significant firepower with high speed and get the best of both worlds. What's there not to love? With over 38,000 tons in displacement, a length of 235 meters, and speeds of up to 31 knots, she was one of the more capable battleships in the entire war. Plus, the ship was also equipped with 9 11-inch main guns, arranged in 3 triple turrets, 12 6-inch secondary guns, and a variety of anti-aircraft weapons, including 10.5 cm, 3.7 cm, and 2 cm AA guns. This balanced arrangement in both offense and defense allowed it to engage both surface ships and defend itself against aerial attacks, though not impervious. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were almost always inseparable in the early stages of World War II, where they were used in Atlantic raids against British merchant ships. Would you believe Scharnhorst sank the armored merchant cruiser HMS Rawalpindi in her first mission? Along with Gneisenau, Scharnhorst took part in Operation Weserübung, the German invasion of, again, Norway. During these operations, the duo fought against the British battlecruiser HMS Renown, and even sank the aircraft carrier HMS Glorious, along with her escort destroyers Acosta and Ardent. Wondering why she was so successful? First off, the Scharnhorst had a heavy belt armor of 350 millimeters that allowed a robust resistance to many of the shells fired by the Allied ships. Additionally, Scharnhorst was very fast. She could almost easily outmaneuver many of the slower British battleships and set the tone of engagement. Finally, she was very potent in long-range attacks. In the battle against HMS Glorious and her escort destroyers, the Scharnhorst achieved one of the longest-range naval gunfire hits in history. However, she wasn't invincible. While her belt armor was robust, the thinner deck armor left it vulnerable to aircraft and plunging fire from long-range shelling. As you can probably guess, it became her undoing. At the Battle of the North Cape, Scharnhorst attempted to attack a convoy but was intercepted by British forces, including the battleship HMS Duke of York. She was outgunned and eventually overwhelmed. After sustaining multiple hits from British fire, it was finally sunk by a torpedo attack from British destroyers. Over 1,900 crew members were lost with the ship. In any case, despite her ultimate demise, the Scharnhorst proved to be one of the most effective surface vessels in the German fleet. She even had significant success stories and gunning feats to back it up. She may have lacked the sheer firepower of the Bismarck, but nothing could stop her from becoming a feared and respected asset in the Kriegsmarine fleet. Unpacking the German naval campaigns in World War II was a lot of fun, but we've come to the end of today's video. Or have we? There are a billion naval stories to share, and we've got lots of them right here in this channel. So, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated when we release a new video. Done that already? Alright, Make sure you go through the channel for more mind-blowing exposés of the juiciest secrets in naval history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.